everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Kevin Goldberg, Vice President and First Amendment expert at Freedom Forum. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me again.
Thanks for having me back.
As you and I have discussed last month, there was a lot of drama and then a slew of lawsuits that came out of the 2024 hit It Ends With Us. Most notably, those lawsuits were tit for tat, it seemed, back and forths between actors Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Last month, we talked about the $250 million libel lawsuit Justin Baldoni filed against the New York Times over the paper's report on Blake Lively's complaint that she accused Baldoni of sexual harassment and orchestrating a smear campaign against her. Since then, Baldoni filed a $400 million federal lawsuit in New York against Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, and then launched a website that posted the amended complaint, as well as what he described as a timeline of relevant events. Out of all of this, that was just a mouthful to get through. What sticks out to you as an attorney?
Well, another thing is that I think Baldoni, right before the first pretrial conference, amended his lawsuit against the Times to add more claims as well. And so, what stands out about this is the fact that this is a PR campaign being played out in the courts, especially the defamation part. I'm really going to focus on that as a First Amendment expert, but also because from a First Amendment point of view, that is unusual, or at least something that we're not supposed to have happen, which is people using the courts to simply bolster their reputation. Now, I'm not saying there's no merit to the defamation lawsuits that Justin Baldoni has filed. I'm just saying that public figures don't usually win these cases and are not supposed to use the courts to try the case in the court of public opinion. They're supposed to respond, maybe using things like a website or their PR people as well.
So let's talk about that website, because that was just a monster of a website. You go on it, and at first there's the amended complaint. Second, there's 168 pages with screenshots, with text messages, with emails, pictures that show or try to show what started as a seemingly friendly and complimentary relationship between Baldoni and Lively sour over the course of about a year, 2 years. What do you make of that website?
As you may have guessed, I think it's unusual, and I'm not sure it's appropriate once you have already filed a defamation lawsuit. It's legally speaking, it's not going to be itself relevant as evidence. It could be introduced into evidence, but there's no need for it, because you could introduce all of these things, and I assume all of these things will be introduced into evidence, which means it only exists for one purpose: to try to sway the public's point of view of Baldoni. And again, the reason we have very strict standards for anyone who is trying to win a defamation lawsuit, and in particular, a celebrity who is trying to win a defamation lawsuit, is they can do things like this, like use a website and a PR team to restore their reputation. They don't need to use the courts to restore their reputation. So why did he do both is my big question. It seems that his real goal is not to win the lawsuit, but to restore his good name, just generally in the public view.
Do you think at all that this helps his case?
I just don't know. I think it's unnecessary to his case. If he wants to win his case, win your case in court. If you want to restore your reputation through this website. It's unusual to see people do both. And again, from a First Amendment perspective, I find it a little disheartening, because when people use the courts for their reputational purposes, they're really only supposed to do that when they have no other recourse. And again, Justin Baldoni does have other recourses. He's shown us he's had other recourses. So he's really using the court system in a way that not only impacts the court system, but may impact us as people. We are the ones that, if he wins this case or forces Blake Lively to back down, might be the next ones. Well, you, as a member of the media, might be the next one who finds themselves on the back foot if a lawsuit has been filed by a celebrity who doesn't like what you've written or said about them. And then perhaps even one of us, one of us normal people, unlike you and unlike Justin Baldoni, might find themselves subject to a lawsuit. And that's not what this is about. That is not what the First Amendment is supposed to do. The First Amendment, that's not how the First Amendment is supposed to work. It's supposed to allow the conversations to occur in public, not in court.
It sounds like from what you're saying that this could open the door for perhaps a slippery slope, because based on what I've seen on the internet in this whole saga, it seemed like the internet was on Justin Baldoni's side. Then when that New York Times came out, it was on Blake Lively's side. Then with this website, it seems like the pendulum's kind of shifting back to Justin Baldoni's side. You're saying that this is disheartening. Do you think this will at all set a precedent where if a celebrity or someone else feels wronged, they're going to try this in the court of public opinion by putting up a website as well as in the court system?
Well, I would rather just see them put up a website if they feel they've been wronged and put it in the court of public opinion. Again, celebrities have a lot of financial strength behind them. They have teams of people behind them, as Justin Baldoni does. They don't need to go to court to restore their reputation. That's what I've said before is that they should really only be doing that as a last resort. So I think that seeing him do both is the unusual step and might be precedent setting. Whether this might embolden others to do the same, I don't know. It's a novel tactic to me, and it is something that may actually backfire on him in the end. I know I'm not on either Team Baldoni or Team Lively Reynolds, but I don't, of course, and I come to this with a bias in favor of the First Amendment and protections for freedom of speech, but I don't love it, frankly. And I don't think, and I think reputationally, which is really what we're talking about in a defamation lawsuit, is his reputation being restored? I'm not sure it is in my mind.
Since you are a First Amendment lawyer, I would love to focus on the defamation part of this, because the lawsuit, among other things, accuses the Lively parties of extortion, defamation, and further wrongdoing. So, A, just how hard is it to prove defamation? And B, based on these 168 pages, do you think he has a case?
Well, defamation is, especially for someone who is defined as a public figure on the law, under the law, as Justin Baldoni is a really hard case to win in many respects, because there are several elements that he's going to have to show, and he bears the burden of proof on all of them. He has to show that there were materially and substantially false statements made about him, that they were assertion of facts. They weren't things like opinion-based statements, that they were made with a level of fault by Blake Lively or the New York Times. That is to say, they knew what they were saying was wrong, or really should have known, recklessly disregarded whether what they were saying about him was true or false. That the factual allegations against him were false, were materially false, and were intentionally or recklessly materially false, and that actual damage occurred to him. So there's a lot of things he's going to have to prove. And none, frankly, is going to be more difficult than that actual malice standard, showing that the people he's suing knew that they were making false assertions of fact, and that requires that he's able to get into their heads through discovery or in court and show that they had doubts, show that they entertained some doubts, and went ahead anyway because they had an agenda against him. That's really often very difficult to prove. Now that said, because there's a lot of factual back and forth on this one, I won't say it's a frivolous claim. I do think this has at least the merit to move forward into what we call the discovery phase, where those inquiries will start to happen.
The judge set the trial date to March 2026. So we still have a while to go here. And we've been seeing this play out in the media and in the court of public opinion now for a couple of months. But the New York federal judge threatened that he would push that trial date up if it continues to be, quote, litigated in the press. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that is a tactic by Baldoni's team to try to move this lawsuit up, or move the trial date up?
Well, to the judge, I say, well done, Your Honor, because I do think that the judge is as sick of the back and forth in public as perhaps I am. And I think what the message is, look, you all decided to go to court. So if you want to go to court, play by court rules. Stop all the bickering in public and come to court and have the conversation here. That's the message that judge is trying to send. And I'm all for it. They never had to go to court, okay? Especially on the defamation claim. I think particularly I'm going to argue that he doesn't have to go to court. It is a big step to file a defamation claim if you're a public figure. Not that they can't, not that they shouldn't. But once you come into court, you need to accept the court rules and understand that's where this is going to play out.
And you're saying, hey, you didn't even need to come to court. That 168-page website could have been enough here. Do you think that the $400 million slapped on that lawsuit, do you think, what do you make of that number?
That's, if you're gonna, I guess if you're gonna file the lawsuit, go for it. This is not unusual either. You're going to file a lawsuit that seeks a number of different types of damages. And there are three different types of damages in a defamation lawsuit. There are actual damages, the actual harm to your reputation. Did he lose his next project that might have paid him 20 million? Right? There are if you can show those special damages, which are things that might go toward pain and suffering and the mental anguish. And then the bulk of this 400 million is what we call punitive damages, which, punitive meaning to punish, are designed to send a message not only to Blake Lively, not only to the New York Times, but to anyone else who might try to speak out on this type of matter in a willful or malicious way. And so, that's really what that's about. It's about trying to ensure that people take the conversation seriously and responsibly if they get it wrong, to understand that it's not a small wrong. If you're a person with money, you're not going to be able to say, okay, yeah, I got it wrong. Here's your check. Let's go on.
Do you think because he posted the website, published every screenshot, email, picture, do you think that website has the potential, and this kind of bickering in the public square has the potential to taint a jury?
It does have the potential to taint a jury, and that's why the judge has threatened to move the lawsuit up, and that is why Blake Lively made a request to the judge for a gag order against Baldoni's lawyers to tell him to stop. And specifically, that was to tell him to stop making statements about her that she felt were harmful and damaging. But, what we always have to do in court cases is balance the right of people to speak, their First Amendment rights, balance the right of the press to cover the trial against the participants' rights to a fair and unprejudiced trial. So every statement that's being made makes it more difficult for that fair trial to happen. And what it's probably going to do is make it harder to find a jury, an impartial jury, to actually sit in on this case if it gets to that point. And that's really what the judge is already worried about.
For pop culture enthusiasts, for the everyday, just normal person, seeing all of these text messages of two of the most famous people in this country, in Hollywood, really was a great insight into this case, because we've seen it play out since the filming of It Ends With Us. There were whispers of, is there drama? And now seeing every text, every screenshot in real time is something. But as a First Amendment attorney here, as the expert, what do you think's missing from the conversation?
Well, again, I think what's missing from the conversation is the question about, does all of this have to happen in court, right? One of the reasons we have a strong First Amendment protection for even speech that might contain some harm, like defamation, and the reason we have these very high standards, especially for celebrities, to win a defamation lawsuit, is we don't want people to resort to the court systems to play out these battles. And so I think, again, as a First Amendment expert who is working for an education whose mission is to foster First Amendment freedoms for all and wants everybody to be educated as much as possible about the importance of the First Amendment, I want people to understand that we want the court system, we want the government to stay out of our marketplace of ideas as much as possible. And so if people take anything away, it's start to question, why does this have to happen in court if they're already trying to fight it out in public? What is being won here, and how might that affect my rights down the line? Right? We've seen a lot of these defamation cases filed by people who were accused of sexual harassment, through the beginnings and the extent of the Me Too movement that continues. We've seen a lot of people who have been accused of things fight back with defamation lawsuits. And that might chill others from coming forward when you're a powerful person a wealthy person and you use the court system to try to silence your accusers, not all of whom are as similarly wealthy and powerful as Blake Lively, we have to ask ourselves, is this the right way to respond if you are, the person who's being accused?
Kevin, I really appreciate your insights today. I appreciate the continuing conversation. And as there are more updates, I hope you come back on and join me and break them down. Kevin Goldberg, thanks for your time.
Thank you as always.